What's up guys, and welcome back. This is going to be part 2 of my review of Stephen King's Night Shift, a collection of 20 short stories. So today in this video I'm going to be talking about the next 5 stories in the order of Night Shift. And the first one up is going to be The Boogeyman. Now this is about a man called Lester Billings, and he's attending a therapy session with the Dr. Harper, I think it is, and he's basically telling a story about how his 3 children died and the bizarre circumstances around it. And we see it from both perspectives of Lester and the Doctor. The Doctor's trying to figure out if he's telling the truth or if he did actually kill them himself. And as we go through the story, it's kind of hard to work out for ourselves because this guy is quite detestable, which is one of the more interesting things about the Boogeyman story. Is this guy is like, he's racist, he's homophobic. Bear in mind this was written in the 70s, so the things he's coming out with were probably less controversial to say in the media than they are now. But it still he makes the character a bit of a dick. So when he's telling us these things about how he treats his wife and his kids and how they die, we kind of get a feeling that maybe he's to blame for it if he didn't kill them himself. So it's interesting to find out what actually happened with the kids and who to believe, really. Now this is like the classic tale of the monster in the closet. He believes the monster has been coming out and basically killing his children one by one after the other, like years apart for no apparent reason. Maybe it's an entity in the house. He kind of blames himself for it at times because he has a tendency to make his kids want to be tough, so he doesn't really baby them and he leaves them on their own in the room, so it's kind of his fault for what happened. So the best thing about this story is the characters, the way Lester is such a detestable character, but you kind of feel sympathetic for him. At the same time you also feel like it's his fault. And yeah, it was just a really interesting story. It was very short but sweet, and the way it ended I wasn't expecting, so that was a nice cliffhanger. Now number 7 on the list is going to be Grey Matter. I really enjoyed this one. This one is about a group of old men in a bar. I think it's a bar or a shop. And one day a young kid comes in. He's a son of one of their regular customers, and he's in just hysteric. And he goes into the back with one of the guy who owns the shop, and tells him what's happened. And as the reader, we don't get to know what happened in the story. But the owner rounds up the kid and the fellow people in the store and gets them to go to his dad's house. And we find out that his dad has been drinking this really weird beer that's got like a silver bacteria or substance coming out of the bottle, and he drinks it anyway, of course, as you do. And something's not right with him ever since. He's sitting around in the house, he's closing all the blinds, and he's like covering himself up in blankets 24/7, and he just starts to change a little bit, and the kid starts to notice, and the kid snaps. He gets to a point where he can't go home anymore, so he goes to the store to get these guys to come and help him out. Now this is definitely a gross story. The silver substance in the beer changes this man in ways that are very grotesque, and the way that King describes it is as grotesque as you can imagine. Think something like the movie Sliver or The Blob or The Thing or something along those lines. It's very like body horror. I think the most compelling part about Grey Matter is the way that the story is told, because once the guy has heard the story from the kid, he doesn't tell his friends immediately what happened. As they're driving over to the place to go to the dad's house, he's telling them the story from the beginning. So as the story goes on, obviously the story's getting more grotesque as it's happening and more dark as they're getting closer to the house. So we as a reader feel the same as the people in the car, because they're getting to learn what they're in for, just as we are, as we're getting very close to the apartment where his dad is. And I'll say I won't spoil too much, but yeah, I really did enjoy Grey Matter, and I think you will too. Okay, next up is Battleground. Now this one is about a hitman, a hired assassin, who lives in a penthouse suite, and he's just accomplished one of his targets, and he's been paid. He's got a lot of money for it. You never find out how much, but he's retreating back to his house. He does 2 jobs a year, he makes enough money to live in his penthouse and live a luxury lifestyle, so he's living pretty good. And as he arrives back into his penthouse suite, he gets a parcel in the post, and it's fun to see how he opens this parcel, because he's a hired assassin. Obviously he's very paranoid, and he goes through this whole rigmarole of all these little things of trying to open the package without being opening and exploding if there's something in there that might hurt him. And it's like a couple of pages of him just putting wires through the tape and stuff like that to make sure this parcel doesn't just blow up in his face, literally. I can't really say much about this story without spoiling it too much, but there's not much to spoil. But basically there's a box of toy soldiers in there, and these things come to life, much like the ones in the Toy Story, except for the ones in this story, Battleground, have a lust for blood, and they want to kill the guys. So the story is basically an action-based one. There isn't much to dive into depth-wise, it's basically just this guy being attacked by soldiers with bazookas and guns and tanks and helicopters in his penthouse suite, and as you imagine, like, the bullets are just like putting little tiny holes in him, and he's like trying to escape. It basically reminded me of the bedroom scene in Small Soldiers with all the Barbies that are like stabbing that kid. And yeah, it was a fun story, but it wasn't one for me. I like the more psychological horror themed ones. But yeah, Battleground was quite fun to read, considering most of his stories are very like character based and psychological. He actually does a really good job of like directing the action in Battlegrounds. It could certainly be like a decent like mini story short film of action. So yeah, I really did enjoy how fun Battleground was, but like I said, it wasn't my sort of story. Now next up is Trucks. Now this one was actually adapted into one of Stephen King's films called Maximum Overdrive, which he actually directed himself, and I actually watched that yesterday, and it was an experience, let me tell you that. You can tell the guy was just high off his face on cocaine when he made that film. It's just explosions, AC/DC blasting all over the place, and just weird shit going on. If you're in the mood for a bad funny movie, then Maximum Overdrive is your one. But the story is basically the same sort of thing, and it's about one day just cars and vehicles and all sort of electronics come to life and just try and take over the human race. This is a theme that he explores a lot in his books, but I guess at this point in time in his career, this was one of the first times he actually did it before Christine or Buick 8 or all those kind of things. The basic premise is a group of people are stuck in a petrol station, a diner I think it is, and all these trucks are just circling around, and there's more trucks coming all the time, and they just want to kill these people. I think one of the problems with this story is it's so like ridiculous, but it takes itself so seriously at the same time. I think if they had more humour in it, it could have been a lot more fun to read, but it was enjoyable. I felt like this one could have been a little bit shorter and sweet, because this one did drag out a lot. It went into like a bit of depth towards the end about how like people are becoming slaves to machines and stuff like that, which is definitely an idea to explore, but not in a book which is just centered around people being like run down by trucks. Essentially the vibe I got from this one is it was like Night of the Living Dead, but with cars. There's people barricading themselves in, and the cars or the zombies are trying to get in, and they have to last until the trucks basically run out of petrol instead of daylight comes where they can escape the house. So that's definitely one of the vibes I got, like a Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead vibe. So that was my thoughts on Trucks. Okay, this is going to be the final story of part 2. Now this one is called Sometimes They Come Back. Now I was really surprised by this one, I really enjoyed it. This one was about a teacher, and he's applying for a new job at a new school, and he has to go through the interview process, and he's talking about how he has he's had a mental breakdown in the past. We don't really get to know why, but we know it's something in his past that's really haunted him through these years. We find out later in the story that him and his brother were both mugged in an underpass by a group of teenagers, and his brother was actually stabbed to death. This is when they were really young, and the story takes place maybe 30 years later, and the basic premise is the kids start going missing in this new school and being replaced by new students. This is like a class for like bad students, ones that no one really wants around, and one by one the gang who attacked him 30 years ago start appearing in his class, and they've not aged a day. So there's this huge mystery about what are they and why are they there, and are they out for revenge? Now I really enjoyed this one just because it was a really good like character story. I really like felt for the guy, the main character, and I really like rooted for him throughout this story. Every now and again we get flashbacks or dream sequences because the guy has like recurring nightmares about the time when his brother died, and Stephen King did a really good job of making this feel not just like a flashback but actually like a nightmare, because we get all these like descriptions of the way he sees things, like this underpass is like getting closer and closer as he's getting to it, which is like him feeling like the pressure and how he's getting closer to his demise or the event that like haunted him. And also the way he tries to run away from the event, he's running, I think he describes it as like a sludge dream like. So I was definitely depicting this like a nightmare more than just a flashback. So with the 3 kids in his class, they're like very menacing bullies. We know Stephen King is great at writing bullies. These ones are real dickheads, and the mystery is we don't know what's happened to them, how they're still the same age. I definitely got a Lost Boys vibe from this one. This one felt like the Lost Boys movie, the vampire movie from the 80s. Well, obviously this came before it, so I'm not sure if there was any kind of inspiration pulled from this story into the Lost Boys. I wouldn't be surprised if there was. One of the staples of this type of like paranoid horror is the way that the main character, I think his name is Jim Norton, feels isolated, because Obviously he can't tell anyone about this. He can't tell anyone that these 3 boys who have not aged in 30 years are haunting him and trying to get into his skull, and it makes him just feel like he's helpless. And I really like that, because you feel like he's out there trying to defend himself all by himself, and that made me root for him even more. The climax was very satisfying as well. I kind of wish it did not go down such a supernatural route as it did. I wished it would have been a bit more grounded, but from what the ending we got, I did really enjoy it. I didn't know this was actually adapted into a movie either. I'm not sure if the movie's similar, because a lot of his adaptations are different, but I think with the emergence of films like It and a lot of films like Pet Sematary being remade, I think this could be a great story if it was made today in the right hands. One thing about the character Jim Norton is he does something towards the end of the story which kind of made me lose a bit of man points towards him. He does something which was, you can't really go back from doing something like that, so it had to happen. King's stories aren't always clean cut. The characters never end up just having like a great happy ending, so it was always going to happen. But yeah, I kind of wish his character did something a little less dramatic. So that's been my review of Night Shift Part 2. This was story 6 to 10. The next video is going to be obviously 11 to 15. So I hope you enjoyed this one. If you have any questions, let me know down below. If you liked any of the stories I've talked about, then let me know in the comments also. Tell me which was your favourite out of the 5, or the ones I've already spoken about. If this is your first time checking out my channel, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button and check out the rest of my content. And make sure you stay tuned for more Stephen King novel reviews coming very soon.